Well, Penn and I are so delighted to have David Greenwood here with us today, the author of Overcoming Burnout. He's also the author of Overcoming Distraction, which we hope to have a separate conversation with him about that. But today we're going to be talking about overcoming burnout. And so to get us started, David, I know that a lot of ADHD parents are going to be at high risk for burnout. What are the signs and symptoms that they might look for if, to give them some kind of sense that maybe this is going into a different direction of burnout and that they should begin to gain some awareness about it and take it seriously?
Yeah, thanks. And I think that's a great place to start. I mean, the symptoms, quite honestly, are endless. I mean, some of the more natural ones are, mental and physical exhaustion, maybe lack of sleep. That's another one that I hear is common, or you can't catch up. Like for example, I know when I was burned out, I could sleep 10 hours and I still felt exhausted. When I got up in the morning, you couldn't, your brain just didn't settle down. So, some of the other ones, there's, loss of appetite, or even food is dull. Like I can't tell you how many hot sauces and different things I was putting on food when I was burned out, because it's like food, just like I was just bored, So,
So burning your tongue when you're burnt out.
yeah, exactly. That's what I had to do. I'm like, it's just like blah, It's like eating pot roast, for like 5 days cold, This is, but one of the things that really, really hit me is when I interviewed a gentleman for Overcoming Burnout, that he got so burnt out, he had a heart attack. I mean, that's how bad this can get. And I don't want to scare people, but, I said, what are the signs of burnout? And he said, the first sign of burnout is when you lose interest in the things you love. He said that he had, and I forget the baseball team, Major League Baseball, but he had season tickets to a Major League Baseball team. He had a box, so he had a parking space. He had all this stuff. All he literally had to do was show up, and he wasn't going anymore because he was so burnt out. So I think that's a clear sign, is that you stop doing the things that you enjoy. Health issues clearly is a big sign. I interviewed people that had digestive issues, went to numerous very high profile hospitals and health institutions, and they couldn't figure it out. Multiple tests. And when they finally figured out they were burned out and got the help they needed, lo and behold, those issues went away. Some of the other things you've just checked out, for those of us in the ADHD world, our reduced executive functions. You can't think clearly, lack of productivity, mistakes, lack of focus. And then I think some of the others are, you feel cynical, you feel resentful, which I think is a big one. You're starting to resent the people around you. And even all the way to anxiety and panic attacks. So as you can see, there is just, that's probably half the symptoms. I saw somebody the other day that said they were so burnt out, they were losing their hair. So yeah.
And so if someone's noticing some of these symptoms, and I know that when you give your workshops, you make a disclaimer, this isn't going to be, a meditation retreat, it's not going to be, but that those things are part of it. So what are the first things that a person could start to do when they're saying, oh, I'm recognizing some of those signs that you're mentioning?
Yeah. I think you really need to try hard to hit the pause button. Just slow it down, find a way to just methodically think about your situation. I mean, I think one of the first things is to talk to somebody. So if you're a parent of a child with ADHD, for example, maybe talk to your spouse, talk to a friend, somebody you trust. If you need to talk to, a professional like yourself, a therapist, somebody that can help you just kind of hit the pause button and just sort this thing out. I think that's that's crucial. You and I have talked about this is the silent epidemic. And I think one of the reasons why is because people do not talk about it. They keep it to themselves. Or maybe they think the situation is going to get better. So I think that's one of the first things is just talk to somebody. But the other thing I tell people, and yeah, I mean, going to the gym, yoga, all that stuff is incredibly important. But it's not the entire solution. However, I think people need to start there. And one person I talked to in the book, said it in a way that says, you've got to kind of prepare your mind to do the work. And one of the first ways to do that is to prepare the body. Go to the gym for 20 minutes, just start. Gym memberships are $10 a month now. There's really, find a way to get there. And I know as caregivers, maybe our schedule is tight. A lot of these places are open, a ton of hours or even 24 hours or what have you. Again, I know that sounds simplistic, but I think you've got to start somewhere. You've got to burn off that energy. I love taking a walk. I mean, I'm not huge on meditation. I've pulled up little 5 or 10 minute things on Spotify to meditate, but I think walking has a different, how shall I put it, different results than the gym. Like I always say, when I go for a walk, no headphones, no podcasts, no music, no nothing. When I go to the gym, I put in my favorite playlist. I put in the AirPods, and I think there's different results for different types of things. So you need to find what works for you. Some of the other things are, talking to us ADHDers in the world, we got to get better with time management. We got to figure out a way because usually when we're burned out, whether it's in a caregiver situation or in a career, we're not managing our time properly. And then if you can, try to just book a weekend away. For people who are burned out, I think it's good to just, an hour away, just so you don't have the temptation to go back home. You need a weekend just in a hotel. Who cares where it is? Go hit the pool, go, have a dinner and a drink at the bar, and just sit there and just kind of just lower the fire, Yeah.
That is such a great recommendation. And I can, just imagine that some people are recognizing that they're having some of these symptoms of burnout. And when you say go take a weekend away, they're thinking, oh my God, that's exactly what I need. And yet they're going to have the but. Is there a way for you to double down? What are going to be the benefits of that? And, one of the things that comes to my mind is that you want to, use that time to recognize the burnout and recognize that you need some sort of a plan to address it, and kind of taking that break to get that clarity. Because I think when you're caught up in your life, you just imagine you can't step away.
No, and I think you just said the key word. I mean, and from, being a professional in the world of ADHD, is that those of us with ADHD need clarity. I mean, and when we're piled on with information overload, or other stresses, or even trauma for that matter, we can't think clearly. I mean, we're doing everything we can to get out of bed in the morning and to get back to bed, and those are our two goals, and we're clawing our way through the day. So I think it's important, again, if you can pull it off. Not all people in the caregiver position can actually get away for 2 or 3 days. I understand that. So, but I think it's ideal where you just have that chance to think, because you can't think when you're in a storm.
That's right. And so, Penn, I just wanted to ask you to reflect a little bit about, have you had those moments where you felt like I need to get some clarity about what's going on, and what kind of tools? And I thought that was funny how David earlier had said something about, I'm not giving the meditation retreat yet. There are things you can learn. What are some things, so it doesn't have to be in those realms, some things that you find can help you use, I'd like to use the phrase, press the reset button, or at least gain that clarity?
I have recently been meditating in the shower, and that helps.
That's okay. To say meditation.
So it's nice. I turn the lights off when I get up early, get in the shower, the lights are off. I just close my eyes in the shower, try to spend, 5 or 10 minutes. I'm not sure the exact amount of time. I don't time it. And that gives me clarity. I would also say that I stopped drinking coffee, and that has helped me. I drink tea. It doesn't give me enough of a kick, I would say. So it's challenging. I drink energy drinks as well, like natural caffeine energy drinks, just because caffeine coffee always made me feel like I needed this crazy sense of urgency to get things done and to complete things. And, I think that those two changes have definitely helped a lot. I try to go for a walk in the afternoon, but sometimes it's difficult. I would say that getting a workout in, David said, getting a workout in early in the morning and making sure that gets done is really important. It's hard for me to get a workout in if I don't do it early in the morning. So I try to make sure to do that, at 7:30 or so. And I guess it's a good segue into kind of exercise and burnout. David, has that been something, because clearly this has been an evolution for you. Has that been something that has this been an evolution for you, or have you always been fairly good at, managing burnout, and it's something that you wanted to kind of share with other people who were struggling with it? Or has that become something that you kind of have mastered over time, and now, you want to kind of share it with the world, since it's such a huge problem, especially in the United States?
I wrote the book because I was saying to myself for months, because this was in the midst of COVID, where I had a son who started a new school, basically at the dining room table, as a lot of kids did. But he wasn't resuming school; he was starting a new school at the dining room table. So it was a huge challenge, and some other family health issues. I had a business that was continuing to pivot. It was the public relations business. And those listening who are in the marketing and PR world will fully understand that it changes all the time. It was hard to keep up. And I was working with I have some great clients, don't get me wrong, but I had a handful of clients that I really didn't like working with. They were not ideal clients. Some of them weren't paying me on time. So there was a whole handful of things, but I was saying to myself for weeks and weeks, like, man, I'm burnt out. Man, I'm burnt out. And I think it was in the shower where I'm like, no, you know what? I'm burnt out. I'm like, my back hurts, my neck hurts, the muscles in my face hurt. Anyways, to answer your question, I was looking for a book, and I couldn't find the book that I actually wanted to read. So I didn't want a clinical book. It helped me understand burnout, but I wanted to hear some street smart advice for how people navigated their situations. So honestly, how I recovered from burnout was actually writing the book, Overcoming Burnout, because that helped me not only get more educated about burnout, but I actually got schooled by a few people, quite frankly, who kind of, I guess, spanked me for some of my habits, So that's kind of how I came to the point of actually writing the book. But it's interesting, when I started writing the book, I realized that I had actually been through this before. And I didn't really call it burnout. I owned a restaurant, and I ended up one evening lying on the floor, bleeding through my nose, like I should have went to the ER, because I had no help. I was running my butt off, and I made a decision that I couldn't do that anymore. But I didn't call it burnout back then. But when I look back, it was a clear case of burnout. My life needed to change.
And when if someone's listening to this and they're starting to resonate, and they're thinking, okay, I'm going to take this 3-day weekend. And you've also raised the issue of the complications when you're also a parent, and you talk about the difference between the way that that burnout impacts your work, but there's something very different about the way that it impacts your parenting. And so can you say some more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think burnout, well, let me put it this way. Burnout is complex. There are many components to burnout. What burns one person out, someone else might love as a career or what have you. So, but I think if we're talking about what we would call caregiver burnout, I think there's a distinction. If you can leave a job, so it might be financially damaging to you, but you can walk out of a job unless you're under contract. So, but if you have any ethics and morals, you're not going to walk out on your family, or somebody you're caring for. So you've got to find a way to make it work. So I think there's a, like I said, there are similarities, but there's clear distinctions in how you may solve the issue of burnout in your life, because you are still responsible for somebody. And I think, people out there that are parents of children with ADHD, depending on the severity of it, would understand that yes, it can be exhausting, but you've got to find a way to make it work. You've got to be there for your son or daughter. So, so I think there's certain things that, again, similarly speaking, you can do just like in a different approach. Like I think you and I talked about, not letting the burnout or the circumstances of being a caregiver run you over. You've got to do what you got to do to be in charge of it, so to speak. So, for me, and driving my father around, for example, I book his doctor's appointments because I'm going to have to drive him anyways. So I make sure that works within my schedule. So different things like that. But I think you've got to sit down and come up with, how can I actually be in charge of this? And if it's just taking a piece of paper and a pen and writing down certain circumstances and writing down what is really stressing me out, and how can I actually be in charge of this, and redirect it. So.
Yeah. And I imagine that could also be helpful, when we have talked about, the interactions between burnout and COVID. I think that one of the things that, in COVID, people lost control completely. There must have been, there was, a sense of helplessness, a sense of, we can't change what is happening. We can't open up the schools. We can't do the things. And so I wonder if, as that there can be this sense of learned helplessness that evolves in a situation like that. And I wonder if sometimes that feeling can persist, even though now we're, not in lockdown, less fearfulness, I think, about, as it kind of, I don't want to say it's going away, but, in terms of we're out of that acute phase. Do you have any suggestions for people in terms of that mindset shift? Like sometimes I keep using that phrase reset button. It's like you get in this mindset of learned helplessness, or you have to somehow get through this, but we don't have that mind shift where you say, okay, this is different. I can take a pause. I need to reevaluate. Do you have any recommendations around that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to my restaurant days where I owned a franchise. So while I say I could walk away, I actually couldn't. So I had, I think, 7 or 8 months on my franchise contract where I was obligated to run that restaurant. What I did do is just hit the pause button and say, you know what, I need to make a decision here. So I made the decision that I was going to get rid of the place. And that I needed a little bit of a game plan to get rid of it. So, I mean, I actually, and I don't advise this for anybody, but I just got in a frame of mind where I said, you know what, I'm going to work my butt off. I'm actually going to cut payroll. I'm going to cut expenses. I'm going to work my butt off because I know on this day I'm walking out of this place because I actually sold it. So that was where I knew there was an end game, so to speak. I was able to create, some type of a mindset that knew that that I didn't have to live like this any longer. I think for caregivers, we've probably need to put some goals in place to say, you know, how can we, and I get it every day, especially parenting, you know, a son or daughter with ADHD or autism or something else can be completely different from one day to the next. I totally get that. But I think we've got to just kind of put some goals in place and figure out how to work towards those. I think that's important as well. I think, and I'll say it again, you've got to take charge of the situation. So, I mean, you can't let it run over you. So you've got to change the mindset of that you were in charge of this.
Yes.
You have the ability to make those changes, and you need to be in control.
I think about from a corporate standpoint, having, you know, those transparent discussions with your manager or with your boss to say, hey, I will actually be more productive if I can leave at 7 p.m. or if I can leave at 8 p.m. You know, these 6 hours or 7 hours, you know, I can hyper focus in on if, you know, I can get out. How important is it to have those conversations? And obviously, sometimes those conversations are fairly awkward to have, because for some individuals, they can sit for 12 hours and they're very productive. For some people, they, you know, that 6 hours may be more productive than the 12 hours. And for them, they, you know, at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., they can't get anything done. I guess, any advice for people who are in that corporate environment who are, you know, are feeling a little bit fearful about having those types of discussions with their managers?
Yeah, I mean, we on the podcast recently, we actually did 2 podcasts. We did one about, and I'm getting to a point here, but one was you know, pros and cons of disclosing your ADHD in the workplace, and the other was kind of how to ask for things in a roundabout way. So I think you've got to analyze your comfort level with, say, your boss or your supervisor or whomever you're reporting to identify if you can actually have an honest conversation. You know, so for example, look, I have a son with ADHD. He's having some challenges, and I really need to get out of here at, you know, 5 o'clock. And but if I do so, I could actually be more productive than, you know, sitting here till, like you say, 7 or 8 o'clock and getting absolutely nothing done. But I think in all honesty, everybody's just got to analyze their own situation and identify their comfort level. You know, you've got many out there in the corporate world that are, you know, have built a culture of openness and understanding. You've got other organizations that aren't. You either do the job or go somewhere else. So I think the first step is just analyzing your comfort level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think a lot of what you're saying has to do with this, again, another mind shift, which is self-empowerment, what would we call it? Kind of advocating for yourself or your child, and recognizing, and it may be a lot of the things people may feel like some fear about taking that step, and it may be doing a cost benefit analysis. Like, okay, this is scary. What are the benefits of this? What are the potential costs? What are, you know, backup plan 1, backup plan 2? So it really does come back to what you're saying, where you have to take control and begin to create a plan and know that you have options. And I think maybe, you know, part of burnout is that feeling that you've kind of lost that sense of self-agency, and that's maybe, you know, it's part of what it is. And so it's a little bit of a you know, part of the symptom to have that sense of not feeling like you can change it. But I think your message is really empowering, and if you could speak directly to that you know, that you may be feeling that sense that you are not in control, but here, you know, saying some more about how you can reclaim that sense that I have choices.
Yeah, I mean, there's a phrase that I used in the book, and somebody probably gave it to me. I can't recall who actually did it, but, you know, they said we're the co-founders of our burnout. You may have a situation where you are in a job or a career that is incredibly demanding, long hours, travel, a culture of hustle, so to speak, or other things. But one thing, and I know there's all this stuff on Instagram and everything else about boundaries. But I think you need to take a look at your boundaries, because that's one of the first steps in getting control back. So, and Penn, like you said, if your boss is telling you to work till 8 o'clock and you give a little pushback and say, no, you know what, I got to get out of here at 5. I think that's one of the first steps. I think it's also important to test the word no, maybe with smaller asks. So if your boss says, oh, you got to fly to Asia for 10 days of meetings, and that's your first test where you say, no way, I ain't going. Maybe that's not the best way to test your no, quote unquote. But I think smaller little tests to just see if you can actually get away with saying no. Because I think there's a lot of organizations out there that will let you work your butt off until the breaking point. So I think that's important. I also think this is another thing I got schooled on, was a misalignment of values. And one of the stories I have in the book was a TV reporter who was a true journalist. He was incredible. Really loved the art and skill of journalism. He's working in TV, and I met him through my work, but it got to a point where there was a misalignment of values, where there was I know I'm out here and telling people that we're in a hurricane or an emergency, and if you want more information, go to the website. And he was just trying to get, his job was like getting clicks, so to speak, for the TV station website. It's just like, I'm out here just trying to sell ads, and I'm a journalist. So there's a misalignment of values. And I think you've got to look at that. That's why I say this is so complex. You need to look at, your role, if you feel you have a purpose, if you feel like this is aligning with your values. Speaking career wise. So, because a lot of that can spill over into your personal life. And if you're a parent taking care of a son or daughter with ADHD, for example, and your whole workday is stressful, then guess what's going to happen? You're going to come home and you're going to be stressed out, and you're not going to be able to adequately care for the people that need it the most, because you're going to be stressed out. You're going to be burnt out.
And so speaking of selling ads, can you tell our audience about your books and about your podcast and anything else you'd like to mention?
Yeah, well, it's they can find the book at overcomingburnout.net. And as we discussed, these are real life stories of people who have gone through burnout and what they needed to do to recover from it and actually prevent it from happening again. And I thought that was important more than actually writing a clinical book, because one of the reasons I did it is because there are so many people from different walks of life, and everyone is different. Like I said, I got a TV reporter, I've got a healthcare executive, I've got a wedding planner, I've got people in marketing. I have a therapist that knew better. So everybody's situation was different, and you can hopefully relate to somebody in that book. Or you can just go on Amazon and look for Overcoming Burnout. It's the cover with the little, paper airplane spreadsheet that's bursting into flames. So
I shared it in our Facebook group,
cool.
in a comment as well, so everyone can find it. And we'll post your book in our Facebook group.
Cool. Awesome.
And you also have a great podcast, David.
Well, it's great because people like you guys come on it, So you've been on several times, and you have offered some, I would say, incredible, but also street smart advice for people with ADHD. So, and I think that's what makes the podcast good, because I'm actually selective in who I put on there. I want people to actually walk away with things that they can use in their lives. So.
Great. And where can they find your podcast?
Overcomingdistractions.com. And you can find it on, as they say, all the platforms, Apple,
All the
Spotify, all that stuff. Yep.
Well, David, this has been amazing. And I hope that, I think it's probably very, very timely. And I hope that some people will see that word burnout and say, oh, I've been thinking about that. What is that exactly? And you've given us a great resource. And I think you're right, that the book that digs deep into other people's stories can be more relatable and more of a wake-up call sometimes than more of a clinical book. So I highly recommend it. And thank you so much, David.
Yeah, thank you
so much,
guys.
David.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, take
Bye.
care.